It's no secret that I've been shilling Crystron for a long time. It's a good deck, and I'm absolutely in love with him. However, there seems to be a lack of consensus among the community as to which variant of the deck is best. Well, instead of me taking a dogmatic stance, I believe that it's each to their own. So today I'm not going to tell you what you should be playing, but rather highlight what makes each variant good and why you should consider them. It's all about making that informed decision. So let's get into it. If you've been following my channel, you know that the pure version is the one that I have the most experience with. The list you see on screen is very similar to the one that I won an OTS championship with. And if you'd like to know more about that event and sort of how to play the deck, I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. The video also contains a small combo tutorial, so you may want to check that out regardless. That aside, the pure version of the deck strikes a nice balance between engine and non-engine. Specifically, the deck has 10 one-card starters, 18 non-engine slots, and about 6 extenders, which makes the deck feel good into most matchups. Essentially, this version excels at playing through hand traps while stopping your opponent from playing via yours. Your basic one-card combo plays through Nibiru and ends with a balance of negates and removal. Plus, Cluster makes your endboard feel resilient against Malice because it prevents your opponent from banishing Crystron monsters you control. It's about as perfect as a mid-range deck can be without you having to break the bank. However, it does have its flaws. See, like Malice and Orcus, which is just around the corner, this version of the deck falls to Lancia and Chaos Hunter. This is not a great place to be when competitive players are devoting up to 6 spots of their extra deck to hunting decks that banish down. This is probably the reason why you'd consider playing another version of the deck. But hey, with a little luck, you could probably go 10 rounds and not get Lancia at once, right? The issue is that it struggles to OTK. This is no ways a deal breaker, but it can be frustrating at times. You can get around this by playing things like Chanbara, but that card just feels kinda ass. Still, there are very few decks better than Crystron, especially if you're on a budget, and I think that's reason enough to consider playing it. Kashtira Crystron has become the most common version of the deck, and for good reason too. See, while this version of the deck has fewer starters, it gets to play Kashtira, which are just some of the best cards ever printed, and they win games on their own. Plus, while not as consistent as the Speedroid package, Kashtiras can be used to make a Dracosack, which then goes into Cherubini to pitch Smyger and go full combo. Of course, to do this you need a way to get into 2 of your Kashtira names. It's for this reason that I recommend playing 2 Fenrir and 1 Planet as opposed to triple Fenrir. However, Planet does expose you to an early draw, so do keep that in mind. That aside, I'd say the main reason to play them is because they account for the deck's inherent weaknesses. The Kashtira cards allow you to play through Dimension Barrier and Lancia to some degree. Plus, they have high attack stats, which helps you close out games in a way that Pure just struggles to. In short, it has a lot of synergy with the deck, but it isn't perfect. See, playing Kashtira means that you can no longer main deck Nibiru, which is just one of the best hand traps of the current format. Also, speaking of Nibiru, sometimes summoning a Kashtira monster before you do your combo means exposing yourself to an early Nibiru. Now, this doesn't happen too often, but it can be frustrating to deal with at times. Apart from this, the deck doesn't feel as consistent as Pure, and sometimes you'll find yourself just playing Fenrir Control until you're able to top deck that starter. Horus is another variant that you'll see flying around, and it has a good amount of synergy with Crystron. See, just like those edgy kids from the early 2000s, almost all of your Crystron cards want to go to the graveyard, and there isn't a better engine at doing this than Horus. What's more, just like Kashtira, Horus are good standalone cards which put in a lot of work. They also check for the deck's inherent weakness by giving you a way of playing through Lancia and D-Barrier while helping you OTK. What separates them from Kashtira is that they allow you to go into powerful rank 8s, like Photon Lord, which reinforces your board, and Zombie Vampire, which serves as a pseudo starter, while also allowing you to keep powerful cards in your deck like Nibiru. The problem, of course, is that like Kashtira, you want to open a Horus starter plus some combination of Crystron cards to get maximum value out of your engine. This usually isn't a problem. You're playing a lot of Crystron cards to begin with, but sometimes it feels like you're just playing Horus Turbo. Also, the Horus engine is somewhat large, so that means that you have less room for non-engine. It's generally not a problem until it is. Symphonic Crystron is the variant you've probably never heard of. The best way for me to describe it is a budget version of Horus. See, Symphonic Guitar Scale Effect lets you discard a card to summon a Symphonic monster from your deck. Our target of choice is Symphonic Mike, a level 5 machine monster that gives you an additional normal summon. The idea is to use Guitar to send your good Crystrons to the grave while summoning a level 5 which the deck absolutely loves. I mean, there's a reason why people in the OCG have been playing K9s in Crystron, but we'll talk about that some other time. Mike of course has the benefit of being a machine, which gives you early access to Nova if needed. The drawback is that the engine doesn't really do anything on its own, and consumes a fair amount of your non-engine. Personally, I'm not fully sold on them, but I think that's just because I just don't see the lines. So I'm counting on you to let me know what you think, and how you think we can optimize this engine. Moving on, Azamina Crystron is probably the variant that players thought would be the most popular in the TCG on release, but it hasn't really seen all that much play. In Crystron, I would define the Azamina engine as a cross between the Kashtira and Horus engine. The Azamina cards help reinforce your end board by providing it with an early Omni Negate without consuming your normal summon. What's more is that Black Witch requires you to discard a card to special summon, meaning that you can easily get cards like Smiger into the grave. I think the best part of the engine is how consistent and low investment it is. Also, it gives you some kind of plays through Lancia, which is always a plus. The drawback, however, is that it doesn't really solve the deck's OTK problem, and the Azamina cards don't do a whole lot by themselves. They clearly trade power for consistency, which is a trade I'll take every time, but it's not necessarily something that every player would be open to. Like the Azamina engine, the Adventure engine serves to establish an early Omni Negate without compromising on your normal summon and using Fateful Adventure discard to capitalize on your grave effect. The biggest advantage to playing this over Azamina is that it doesn't consume any of your extra deck spots, giving your deck more versatility. Plus, the engine pairs well with Cherubini, who can be used to dump Water Enchantress into the grave should you already have access to inclusion. Basically, it's got good synergy with the deck. However, the Adventure engine is not small. So again, you're compromising on non-engine spots to increase the ceiling of your deck. Some people are comfortable doing this, others are not. Also, it's worth mentioning that the Adventure engine kinda compounds your weakness to Lancia, so keep that in mind before picking it up. Dragon Ruler Crystron has got to be the most consistent version of the deck, providing it with up to 3 additional starters. It plays very similar to the pure version of the deck, with the obvious benefit of seeing one of your starters more often. Plus, it doesn't consume too much of your non-engine, making it a solid consideration for larger events. Tidal also has a decent attack stat which can help you put up lethal. The drawback of course is that it doesn't really do anything about your Lancia problem. In fact, it compounds it. Also, while in theory Tidal is a free body, in practice you'll rarely want to banish your good cards from grave to summoning. So it predominantly serves as Foolish Burial copies 2 to 4, which is amazing, but it isn't going to raise the ceiling of your deck by any means. It sounds like I'm hating on them, but this is a very minor criticism. Kashtira Azamina on Crystron is about the only 50 card monstrosity you'll ever see me play. It basically has the advantage of both engines while drastically increasing the ceiling of the base deck. When you see both halves of the engine, that is. It accounts for all of the deck's weaknesses and doesn't drop the consistency of the deck by too much despite being 50 cards. Surprising, right? However, while addressing some of the deck's shortcomings, it also introduces new ones, both of which center around the deck wall, being huge. Firstly, Roland Lockbird feels very impactful against the strategy, as it will normally cut you off from seeing one half of your engine, or the other engine. This feels concerning in a format where people are playing Roland Lockbird in their main deck for decks like Raisel Mitsurugi. Secondly, and similarly, Full Loss becomes problematic, and when it resolves, your 50 card deck is going to feel like a liability. Thirdly, you're less likely to see your cards post-siding. I don't like this. Your side deck is one of your best weapons in the game, and seeing your counters less is concerning. This is generally why I recommend sticking as close to 40 as possible, but hey, these engines are pretty strong, so I'm guessing a skill pilot might be able to just, take it to success without needing the extra deck as much. Lastly, it's expensive. You're not only paying for Kashtira, but for Azamina as well. at this point it might be worth considering something else like Ryziel or Malice instead. That being said, if you already own those engines, it might be the deck for you.